All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here, and today we're doing our tier list, our first official meta deck tier list of this new season of the B3B Everyday Wonders season. Things have changed a lot. We did have the PMPT holiday special this past Sunday. Go check out the Meta Monday meta report if you haven't. I've uploaded that yesterday, but it's Tuesday. We do tier lists on Tuesdays, especially at the beginning of the new season. So I have all of the most played decks, both from previous seasons and the current season, the new decks. This is what people are playing right now, at least in online tournaments. So we do have the data, we have the results, and I'm going to basically be ranking all of these decks based on how strong I believe they are as, meta deck picks going into really the next week of play, the second week of competition, mostly for online tournaments, but maybe this is the Emblem event, maybe you're playing in some other type of system, I don't really know. I'll likely do an updated tier list when Ranked comes out, but anyway, let's break all of these decks down. Now, before we get into it, you do have to go register for PMPT number 38, which is the next sort of normal, structured PMPT tournament, which is this upcoming weekend, July 11th at noontime, $100 cash in the prize pool. Whimsical Wonders is what it's called. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to live stream it as well. Link to register down in the description below. Let's do it. Now, here's the tier list, and again, if there aren't any decks on this tier list, that's because they're just not really seeing any play. So you might be curious, so where does this deck rank? Where does this deck rank? It might not be bad, it might be really good, it might not be really good, it's hard to tell. It's just that, if people haven't been playing that particular deck, then we don't have the data, and it's hard for me to rank them, right? And I don't have the time to personally extensively test every single deck in the entire game, right? So that being said, we have a lot of new decks, and I'm excited. And what we're going to be doing is cross-checking these decks with the overall season data that we've accumulated so far. Again, 32 different tournaments and over 8,000 matches, right? So we do have a pretty decent sample size. I know some people sometimes doubt the data, but believe me, it's by far the best thing we have to gauge the quality of decks, at least in their position in the metagame. Okay, so let's get right into it. In no particular order, we're just going to go in order of how they are here on our tier list maker. And yeah, let's just do it. Let's get right into it. There should be timestamps down below if you want to navigate through the video that way. These videos can get sometimes pretty long, so we'll see how long this video goes for. But anyway, the first up is going to be Sleep Altaria and Espeon. Now, Sleep is definitely not in nearly as good of a position as it was, I guess, if you wouldn't even want to say that last season, at least in terms of popularity of tournament play. Sleep Altaria was extremely prominent last season, as everyone knows, but it did have its struggles, especially towards the end of last season. However, with Milotic releasing, it does seem that a lot of people initially who were on the Sleep train, so to speak, initially just sort of hopped off Altaria to play Milotic, which might be fine, it might be good, it might be less good. It's hard to tell specifically, but if we scroll all the way down, Sleep Altaria is actually nearly tied for Sleep Milotic as the 18th and 19th most played decks. Now, it's not doing terribly. I will say it's 87 and 89, so this is clearly a deck that is not bad in general. And as we see, Sleep Milotic has a 45% win rate. This does kind of, I guess, fall in line with my expectations here. Is that Altaria and the Bad Dreams package, it's probably better to just play Altaria than it is Milotic. Milotic has some advantages. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't deal enough damage, and if you're entirely reliant on Darkrai, you're going to get kind of hard countered by decks that have counterplay to status conditions. Things like Ogerpon, things like Comfey. So I think Sleep Altaria is probably a pretty fine deck list. Now, I don't know if I really want to put it in the A tier. It is about a 50% win rate, which probably does at least warrant like an A tier mention. What we're going to do in today's tier list is probably have a ton of decks in the A tier. We might shift things around as the tier list goes on, as we start to place these deck lists, but honestly, Sleep Altaria, I imagine, is probably going to be a lower A tier deck, but I don't think it's, I think it's good enough to be A tier, but it's definitely not anywhere near S tier. In fact, it's probably bordering on a high B tier placement, so we'll start it in the low A tier, maybe it moves to high B tier, but that's kind of how I'm feeling about this. So that being said, I need to pull up the deck list, right? I need to remember to do that here for the tier list. So here you go. Sleep Altaria. Nothing's really changed here. If you're going to be playing Espeon and Darkrai and Igglybuff and Altaria, it's all the same. There's not anything new that came out for this particular strategy. In fact, Altaria itself isn't seeing very much play, mostly because Sleep got changed with Milotic, so people are playing Milotic with that. But also, if you're playing a Psychic type deck, a lot of people have been playing Gardevoir and Diancie, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But here you go, the #1 example this season of Sleep Altaria, and it's probably not much different than what you guys are, kind of expecting it to look like, which is maybe fine. Okay, next up, let's talk about Blaziken. There are a couple of Blaziken decks, so let's knock them both out. I think Blaziken's actually been having a pretty decent season. One, I think Grass is phenomenal right now. A lot of people are playing Grass-type decks, and I think Blaziken, one of those true, solid Pokemon into other Grass-type decks. I just feel like that's typically the case, mostly because of Castform and how easily you can sort of KO, those basic Grass Pokemon on your first turn. Things like Caterpie, things like Pheromosa, for example. Trico is another example. So, Castform, Blaziken is very good. It leans into the fire typing quite well. But let's take a look at Blaziken, if we can find it. So Blaziken Greninja is by far the most played version, but if we scroll down quite a ways here to the 33rd most played deck, which is crazy. This is Blaziken Castform, Sunny Day Castform. Now, I don't really think this deck has changed a whole lot. I like this list. Double Hiking Trail makes sense with Castform. Very standard Sabrina, Cyrus, Rare Candies, Flame Patches, and we are playing one Protective Poncho. So this deck list isn't even playing Heatmore. This is the highest placing Castform Blaziken deck of the season. And like I said, I think it's a totally fine deck. It's very straightforward, pretty consistent, if I'm being honest with you. I think Hiking Trail is a pretty good card in any of these types of decks. I genuinely think that Blaziken's probably going to be a very solid choice throughout this entire season. As you saw there on the deck data, as it turns out, I think that Blaziken Greninja is probably a bit better, but also going to be much more popular this season. So again, I'm going to put Blaziken Castform. You know what? We need to be a bit more... If I keep going on this trend, we're going to have this entire tier list into the A tier. I'm now realizing this, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually just going to put both of these decks into the B tier. That's what I'm going to do, because I do want to have a pretty clear separation, especially for decks that maybe have something similar that's just better than them. I think we're going to put both of these in like the B tier, high B tier. That's where we're going to go. I do feel like Castform Blaziken, because the sample size is a bit smaller, but as well as Sleep Altaria, I think these are very middle-of-the-road decks currently this season, so I'm going to put them both in the B tier. We're going to have a quick change immediately and put them both in the B tier. The tiers themselves don't necessarily matter that much. It's more so just the order of the deck lists. That's kind of how I go by, and then I try to find good breaking points to split them up by tiers. That's typically how we like to do it, but anyway, that's Blaziken and Castform. But next up, we're going to talk about Blaziken and Greninja. Blaziken Greninja, which is coincidentally one of the most played decks this season. Greninja's been super popular. And as you see, like, what is this? 3 out of the top 8 decks right now are playing Greninja. And Blaziken Greninja is doing very well. A lot of people are playing it, and it's 330 wins to 274 losses. That's a 53% win rate. Very, very strong deck. I personally think that Greninja Blaziken is just pretty well positioned into a lot of the different things in the metagame right now. This deck is actually playing 1 Sunny Form Castform, 1 Heatmore, and then a 1/1 Greninja lineup. This deck list actually definitely got a bit better after Juliana came out in the previous season. I mean, I think that it's still a bit of a high roll strategy. I think this is definitely not the most consistent deck out there, but the truth is you have plenty of bench damage. Blaziken plus Greninja is a really, really strong combination. Flame Patch does kind of give this deck a nice little, boost in here. There's a lot going on. At the end of the day, this is not going to be the deck that is always performing the way you want it to, but if this is a deck that is well positioned into the metagame, which I think it is because we have a lot of other Greninja decks and a lot of other grass decks, I think that Blaziken and Greninja, although maybe not the most consistent deck in the game, is actually pretty well positioned to do very well, at least in the first week so far this season. And I think moving forward, I think grass will continue to see quite a bit of play. But water might see more play as well as time goes on. So we're going to have to just sort of wait and see how this all unfolds. But I really do like Blaziken Greninja. I think this is a very, very solid deck. And again, if we go back here, this win rate was very impressive here. 330 to 274 is a really, really good matchup. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put this in the A tier. This is definitely something I would choose above Castform Blaziken, but I'm not giving it like the S tier mention just yet. I think this is just a really, really solid deck currently. Now let's get into the Sceptile decks, I guess, because we do have 2 of them. So the first one is going to be Grass Sceptile, and it's really interesting because both Blaziken and Sceptile are both interesting Pokemon, but they're both super similar in just sort of how they function. And what's really funny is that both of these archetypes, Blaziken and Sceptile, have fire-only archetypes, but also grass-only archetypes, and then they both also have the Greninja deck, and both of those are like pretty similar. So it's kind of funny. Let's take a look rather at Grass Sceptile, which is like the pure grass type version right now. The best way to play this is with Butterfree. I do think that like it's a kind of an upgrade to the previous grass-only Sceptile decks that we saw in previous seasons with like Pheromosa, with Ogerpon, with Chingling, I guess, which isn't a grass Pokemon, but This is sort of the deck that deck list is sort of like replacing. And it is actually the 4th most played deck this season. So again, going back to that Blaziken positioning thing, 3rd and 4th most played decks so far this season are both Sceptile grass decks. So you can see why Blaziken would be pretty well positioned. But Butterfree Mega Sceptile has gone 424 to 369 with 34 ties. And I think a lot of those ties probably do come down to like Oricorio matches where Butterfree can kind of stay alive for a very long time. Either way, it's a very, very solid win rate. I know this only says 51.27%, but 424 to 369 is a very, very good win rate if you don't account the ties, right? It's actually incredibly, incredibly high. Not as high, though, as Greninja and Sceptile right now, but a very solid deck list. So let's pull up an example so you guys can take a look. I think Butterfree's really, really strong. I think it's straightforward. This is a deck that's really, you're not playing item lock, you're not playing Greninja, you're not even really playing rare candy in the deck list. You're just playing a really hyper consistent deck that, has so many different advantages between quick growth extract, quick growth, Caterpie ability, and then fragrant forest, as well as research and copycat. You're just moving through your deck so efficiently, and it's just a very consistent deck. Lots of HP on the board, very straightforward, but a very strong deck, and one that I really do like because it feels very grass type to me. This feels like a deck with a true identity, which I really like. I like the X speed and I like the Giovanni for consistency reasons. Double extract, I do like when people play May into this deck list. That's my own personal opinion, but here, this example is certainly very, very strong. This is a good deck. This is a very good deck. I'm going to put this in the A tier. I'm going to put it right below Greninja Blaziken, not just because, Blaziken defeats and beats Sceptile in the head-to-head, but I just personally feel like Blaziken, at least moving forward this week, is going to be more well-positioned than Sceptile is at a basic level. So that's kind of how I'm feeling here. Let's put Blaziken and Butterfree into the A tier. But next up, let's take a look at Sceptile and Greninja, which is the other Sceptile deck, and a deck, rather, that is extremely good so far this season. The 3rd most played deck this season, and definitely one of the most successful and impressive win rates. As we see here, it is the 3rd most played deck, 7% of the meta, 691 to 561, with 34 ties, which is crazy, right? So this deck list has almost a 54% win rate, but that's also accounting for the 34 ties that it has, right? So if you get rid of those ties, this thing is pushing, I don't know what that is. It's probably close to like a 58% win rate. So very, very strong. This is a deck that has done extremely well over the last week, but there is a story behind this. So I think that Sceptile and Greninja was kind of a direct counterplay option to, the Dark Greninja decks, which really took over the metagame in the first couple of days this season, right? You got to understand, like, the Sableye stuff was everywhere, and that's when Sceptile began to rise to prominence. That's why I do think its win rate is probably slightly inflated. It could go the other way going into this upcoming season with more Blaziken and Fire-type decks, but, I think that more so than anything, Water-type decks will likely be a bit more popular in Lightning because those were the 2 decks that we saw in finals. So that being said, I think this is still definitely one of the strongest decks currently right now. This has to be an incredibly, incredibly strong archetype here. Now, do we want to give it the S tier nod? That's the question. Because the win rate is there. If we go back, like, it's kind of got everything going for it. One of the most played decks, one of the best win rates. It's right up there. It really is. I mean, I would put it above Blaziken Greninja, at least currently. And I do think it's just better than Blaziken Greninja, maybe not in the head-to-head, but in general, I do think it is. Now, I'm kind of surveying my options here to see, what kind of S-tier placements we're working with. Yeah, I've sort of thought about it, and I'm going to put this in the S tier. I just think moving forward, again, even though Blaziken's seeing a bit more play, this is just such a strong deck right now. I mean, I think Sceptile is incredibly well positioned into all of the dark type decks, but, when you play Sleep, you're feeling pretty fine about that, especially some of the water type and lightning type decks that are going to be very popular moving forward. I actually really feel confidently about Sceptile into the greater scope of the metagame throughout, the upcoming week, basically, of the season. So I'm going to put it in the S tier. There's going to be a few decks in the S tier, but I think this is definitely just sort of a bit better. Like, if I had to choose between any of the Blaziken stuff and any of the Sceptile stuff, that's kind of the order I would do it in. I would play Sceptile Greninja or Blaziken Greninja, and then I would play Grass Sceptile above Fire Blaziken. That's just sort of how I feel. So there you go. That's just my opinions. That's how we're feeling there. Anyway, let's talk about Gardevoir. So I only have one Gardevoir here on the tier list, and as you'll notice, some of these archetypes are condensed. Gardevoir is split up into so many different categories, and fundamentally right now, I just don't think it's well optimized. I think there's a lot of progression yet to be had with Gardevoir. Now, there's the two main ways that people are playing it here are going to be Gardevoir, Mega Gardevoir, and Diancie, which is basically a deck, and I'll pull it up here. This is going to be a deck with Mega Gardevoir. This is just one example playing Side Turbo as well as Carbink, which I find to be very interesting. But let me pull up the other example here, the top example of this archetype, which is a bit different. If I can pull this up. So this is going to be with two Meloetta and then one Comfey. And I'll keep this on the screen because this, to me, I feel like is probably the best example of Mega Gardevoir that I can really define. And like I said, the deck lists are changing. They're being refined. They're getting updated. Things are going to look very different for Gardevoir moving forward. But I do think that a couple of Gardevoirs did very well this season. And in my experience watching this deck list compete this weekend, I think it is legitimate. It's a totally strong strategy. It was struggling a little bit into the Sableye stuff, but I think that, you know, the greater scope of the metagame and Diancie being able to one-hit KO Pokemon is fundamentally a pretty big deal. I still feel like we should be investing a bit more into the non-EX Gardevoirs because the prize math just feels a bit better, and going into Gardevoir and then retreating oftentimes is kind of a suspect strategy. However, you know, if you can pull it up, if you have Diantha, it's probably a totally fine thing to do. Now, again, if we go back to the win rates, this version of Gardevoir, which is the 5th most played version, only has a 44% win rate, which is quite poor. But this archetype is 155 to 146. So there's definitely sort of a lot of room for improvement here as far as Gardevoir goes. I think all it takes is like one Gardevoir to place extremely high at a large tournament, or, you know, somebody popular to release a deck list, you know, coming up soon for Mega Gardevoir that people kind of utilize. And if it does well, it'll kind of solidify its space into the metagame. So, you know, that being said, I think Gardevoir definitely has A-tier potential. I don't know if it actually will end up being A-tier, but again, I think the win rate was definitely deflated in the first few days because of how much Sableye was seeing play. And we're really not going to see that much Sableye, or at least as much, moving forward. It's going to be more, you know, Sceptile, Blaziken, Milotic, like grass and then lightning type decks. And honestly, I think Gardevoir does pretty well into most things that aren't dark, right? So I think Gardevoir, we're going to keep it in the A-tier. I am going to put it below Blaziken, Greninja, and Sceptile, Butterfree, but definitely a very solid deck. I think it's like a middle to low A-tier deck currently. Next up, Meowscarada. Let's take a look at Meowscarada. It is actually the 15th most played deck this season, and it's got a really solid record, 121 to 102. I like Meowscarada. Now, I think this is also one of those decks where, and we're going to start to get into these like A-tier placement decks where there's just a lot of really, really solid decks in the metagame. Meowscarada can hold its own. You have non-EX Meowscarada, which is a really solid card. You have Ogerpon, Fragrant Forest, Leaf Cape, Erica. Very, very solid deck. As far as these like pure two-prize archetype decks go, Meowscarada is one of the best in the game, and I think it really does come down to the fact that we have so much good grass support. Double Leaf Cape, double Fragrant Forest is a really big deal. Just a really, really strong deck, and utilizing Ogerpon, I think, is a really, really awesome inclusion here. I just really like Meowscarada. I do. Now, the 15th most played deck is probably where it will maintain for the rest of the season. It might go up a little bit, it might go down, but fundamentally, that's kind of where we're at. It's just like the third or fourth grass type deck option, but all the grass type decks are quite good. And again, 121 to 102, which is a really solid record. I'm going to put Meowscarada also in the A tier. I'm just going to put it, I'll put it, I guess, right here below Gardevoir, but maybe above Gardevoir. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. It's one of those mid to low solid A tier decks. It's just a very solid deck. There's going to be so many decks in the A tier. Trust me, there's going to be a lot. And I feel that way strongly. I think there's just so many strong options right now. We'll put it right there for now. How about that? Next up is going to be Milotic. We actually have two Milotic decks on here. We have Sleep Milotic, but we also have Vaporeon Milotic, which is definitely becoming the more popular option, especially after this past weekend's performance. So let's talk about it. So it's the 11th most played deck right now, and it does have barely a 50-50 record. It's 161 to 156, seven ties. That does put it just above 50%, even though if you count the ties, it's just under 50%. But if we go down, there is another version of Milotic here with Qianpao, and it's categorized differently, but this, as you see, also has Eevee and Vaporeon in it. You know what I mean? So, like, effectively, these are the same decks. They're just sort of structured a bit differently. This archetype here is better. Just sort of, I guess, the one Vaporeon is doing better. But this version here, if we take a look at it, is going to be like the double EV Vaporeon version, you know, with Sightseer. I think this is like the Saigon list. So even though Saigon's version of this deck has a lower win rate average-wise, it's more popular, and I do think this is a very, very solid deck moving forward. Now, again, I'm just going to put these two together. Basically, anything that's playing Milotic, Vaporeon, and Qianpao combined, you know, it will look something like this. And I'm being honest with you, I mean, this version with just the single EV and Vaporeon has a higher win rate. Now, it really depends on whether you think Oricorio is a massive factor, right? I think the other version with double Vaporeon is very nice into Oricorio because you don't really ever have to worry about it. Between Qianpao and the double Vaporeons, you can just kind of get around Oricorio stuff pretty easily, and that's a big upside. But in general, the core of the deck should be Qianpao and Milotic, and I don't really think Vaporeon matters a ton. Or sorry, I don't really think you don't need like 2 Vaporeons, right? All you need is like 1 to follow through with the fundamental strategy of the deck list. So either way, let's kind of mix them all into one archetype, which again, that being said, is a very solid deck. I'm going to be putting this into the A tier. Very middle. I'm going to say like mid to high A tier here. I really think Milotic Vaporeon is super solid. Well, after some time goes on, maybe the deck list kind of gets refined. Things kind of get settled upon. Again, I don't actually know if that Vaporeon EX version that became popular, I think because of Saigon's posting, I don't think that's I would be surprised if that is the end all be all of the deck list. As we saw, its win rate isn't necessarily that high. And if the meta changes, if Oricorio is not that popular, then it's just not something that you really need to be playing. But I do like Vaporeon EX, quite frankly. I think it's really solid. I don't know if it's better than just playing a Cyrus in your deck. But anyway, either way, no matter which way you play this deck, I'm going to be putting it right here solidly into the A tier. So there you go. And now let's talk about Bad Dreams Milotic, Sleep Milotic, which is, I know, something that everyone loves. It is, if we can find it, it is the 18th most played deck this season, and it does have a 45% win rate, 197 to 112. Not doing great. In fact, the only somewhat decent placement here is at this Dark League 4th of July, placement. So, this is not a weak deck by any stretch. There's definitely a future of this metagame where people just start to just not really care much about sleep and they don't counterplay it enough. And then this becomes somewhat strong. However, I stand on my reasoning that I think the Altaria sleep version is just a better version of the Bad Dreams Igglybuff. I straight up believe so. Again, the Caterpie, the quick growth Caterpie stuff kind of hard counter sleep in a hard way, which is really fun. And I do love that. But also, there's just a lot of quick growth extract grass decks. There's just too much going on. A lot of PCL, a lot of Ogerpon, a lot of Comphase in those psychic decks. So, I just don't think this is that good. I'll be honest. I just really don't think this is that good of a deck list. I don't think it's terrible by any stretch. I'm going to be putting this, do we put it C tier? It's not great. This is going to be one of the lowest win rates out of any of the decks on the tier list, right? So we kind of have to rank it appropriately. I'm looking at the numbers here. Yeah, it's down there. It's very much down there. It's actually like the lowest other than Ursaluna. So I think C tier is probably the placement for this. It's probably just a C tier deck. And again, a very similar deck, right? Just better than it. Just right here, just play this. If you really want to play Bad Dreams, just play this. It's objectively better, I think, currently, and probably will be for the remainder of our days here in Pokemon Pocket. But anyway, Bad Dreams Milotic, it's going to go C tier. It's just not nearly as good as a lot of the other stuff. Anyway, Hisuian Goodra. Hisuian Goodra. People are playing this. Where is it? The 27th most played deck. And look at this. 75 and 69. Hisuian Goodra is objectively a much better deck than Sleep Milotic, which is super funny. This is not bad. It's kind of like the new version of the old Goodra back in the day, except now, we're not even playing it with Indeedee. You don't even need to. You play Heavy Helmet, you play Lily, and you flip coins, and sometimes you just can't beat this deck list. You don't have to deal with Oricorio. The Sticky Membrane Goomy is a massively underrated it's underrated. It's a really good card. It's also really good into Igglybuff. So I really like this deck list. Effectively, you have to play dual energies, I think. I believe this deck probably plays dual energies. I'm not even really positive about that, but I think it's totally solid. Again, Lily, 150 HP, Heavy Helmet, Lily, Lucky Ice Pop. This thing is not going down. Securely Sheltered is not the most consistent ability in the game, but it's inherently broken. It's incredibly strong. And it does 120 damage, which is a really big upside, I think, from the other Goodra, which did 90 or 80 damage. So it's 3 energies, 120. It doesn't have any weaknesses. It's honestly a totally strong Pokemon. I actually think this deck list is very respectable. So Hisuian Goodra is going in the B. I'm putting this B tier. I'm putting this solid B tier. I'm going to put it below Sleep Altaria just for the reasons of, my confidence personally isn't like that high, but it is better than Bad Dreams Milotic. I think objectively, given the data that we have, I'm going to put it right here. In fact, you could make a case it's better than both sleep decks, but I'm going to put it right here. I'm just going to put it solidly right there in the B tier. Shout out to Goodra. We love it. We love it. Next up is going to be Miraidon Magnezone. So Miraidon Magnezone is the second most played deck so far this season, but it was the most played deck at our tournament, and it likely will be the most played deck moving forward. And for my money, it's up there as one of the best decks in the game. You got to understand that this is a deck that is not really going to care much about meta progressions. The only thing that I could see moving forward is if maybe some fighting type decks became exceedingly popular this season, but I don't really think Lucario, which is really the only fighting deck we have, is going to be that popular. Maybe it becomes more popular as time goes on to counterplay Miraidon Magnezone. But honestly, this is still one of the best decks that you could possibly imagine. It won the J. Dankus Cup. It made it to grand finals of our tournament. It's just so good. It's so good. It's basically just Turbo Miraidon. We've now began to play this deck as basically just a Miraidon deck. Double Zeraora, double Magneton, double Miraidon, and one Turo. And good luck. I mean, at the end of the day, just good luck with the Miraidon that's coming in with 5 energies on turn 2. You're not going to love it. You're not going to appreciate it. And it's not going to feel fun. You're going to be like, why is it able to do that? And it's just, that's how Miraidon is. It's just a really strong card. Lightning in general is strong. Just tons of energies on here. Being able to chain together Miraidons is a really big deal. It only has 140 HP, which I always find to be definitely a downside to Miraidon. But again, you come in and you take a KO and your opponent's probably not in a position to KO you, back anyway. So you can kind of ride out. And then again, if you do tank a hit, you can giant cape it to go to 160. You can chain together Miraidons. It's really good. I mean, this is still fundamentally one of the best decks we've ever had in Pokemon Pocket. And Mirror Shot Magnezone, even though we only have one of them in the deck, is like inherently broken. Mirror Shot Magnezone is crazy. Anyway, S tier. We're going to go S tier. In fact, I will probably put this. Do I put it above Sceptile? You know what? I don't know if I will. You know what? No, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna put it right here in the S tier. It's S tier. It's definitely better than almost everything else. Like, that's just the reality here. It's so good. It's just really good. It's like the final form of Magnezone. Now there's just like a really solid EX card to carry it. We saw it dominate last season. It's just going to continue to be the default lightning type deck in the game, and it's going to be one of the best decks in the entire game. What's interesting is that it's actually much more similar to Mega Manectric than it ever really has been, and I find that to be very interesting, but it's really good. Super good. Okay. Anyway, S tier for there. Okay, moving on. Let's do these dark type decks because there's a lot, and I have gone through the trouble of putting both Zoroark and Hydreigon versions on the tier list. That's right. I did it for you guys. I have Hydreigon Sableye, Zoroark Sableye, and then I have Zoroark Absol and Hydreigon Absol. I have segmented them out, and I will be ranking them. And then we also have Dark Sableye here. We also should have Greninja Sableye somewhere. Do we not have that on the tier list? Did it slip through the cracks somehow? Did it? Do we not have? Okay, I guess we don't have Greninja Sableye on the tier list. I don't know how I forgot it. My bad. Okay, so I apologize. Anyway, let's talk about all of these decks, all of the dark type decks, okay? First off, let's talk about Hydreigon and Sableye, because there is sort of, at least the data is showing us clear differences between these archetypes, right? So here is Hydreigon and Sableye, the 8th most played deck. So as far as dark type decks go, this is the most popular. It's about a 50-50 win rate, just right down the middle, 50-50. Again, I don't really think Hydreigon is especially well positioned given all of the Sceptiles and stuff, but I think it's a totally fine deck. And again, it does have, it's the 8th most played deck, has about a 50% win rate. Now, if we go down to Hydreigon and Absol, it's about the same, very closely to a 50% win rate. It's less popular, but very, very similar. So honestly, as far as Hydreigon goes, and I've been saying this for a very long time, it just doesn't really matter that much. Like, at the end of the day, like, Hydreigon wins games because of Hydreigon. That's how you win Hydreigon games, is by getting Hydreigon and attacking, and then maybe, maybe it comes down to Absol at the end. But if it comes down to Absol at the end, it probably is, Sableye is probably going to work as well. They're effectively the same card in that sense. And I know they're different, but for Hydreigon purposes, they're very similar. These are both totally good decks. Now, I mean, do I want to put them in the A tier? Or do I want to put them top of B tier? I think Hydreigon's probably just a very decent deck right now. I don't know. There's going to be too much grass this season for me to feel great about Hydreigon, so I'm just going to put them right here. I'm going to put them like both high B tier. I guess we'll put Absol above it, because just to make the Absol lovers happy, because it does technically have a better win rate. But these are both I mean, they're just very decent decks. That's all it is. They're just really decent deck lists. And I find that to be fine. That's cool. You know, shout out to Hydreigon. And again, I guess I should pull up an example for you guys. Here is Hydreigon and Sableye, which is actually playing Absol and Sableye. So I don't even know what we're talking about, I guess, at this point. Why are we playing both? I don't know. I really don't understand the obsession with doing that, but that's Hosey's deck. What's this one? Can we take a look at this? This is going to be Hydreigon without Absol, but with Sableye. And we're actually playing a Julian in the deck. This is hilarious. We're not playing, what is this deck list? We're not even playing Bombardier or anything. We're just playing Juliana, PCL, Double Lucky Ice Bob. Listen, I'm all about it. Just go straight Hydreigon and just do it, man. Just go all in. That's pretty funny. And then if we take a look at the Absol deck here, this is going to be the highest placing version. This is without Sableye. We are playing Bombardier this time, and no Sableye, right? We're playing Absol. So, I mean, again, you guys can say which one you think is better or not. I totally agree or disagree, depending on what you say. But at the end of the day, like, the deck is 99% the same if you're just playing Hydreigon, you know, Rocky Helmet, Ice Pop. Like, that's the core of the deck. It's not, you're not really changing that much. And I think no matter what you're playing from the Hydreigon perspective, it's probably fine. So we're going to put them both high B tier. I think that's probably good. But now let's take a look at Zoroark. Let's take a look at Absol Zoroark and Sableye Zoroark, which again, probably, I don't know what the Zoroark decks are doing right now, but they're probably similar. But what I did notice is a massive discrepancy here. A very, very large discrepancy between Zoroark Sableye and Absol Zoroark, right? So if you take a look at this, Zoroark and Sableye has a 48% win rate, but Zoroark and Absol has a 97 to 70%. That's a 57% win rate. So I guess just going by the data, and I know the sample sizes aren't massive, so it could just be an anomaly, but at least from what we're seeing right now, Absol is much better with Zoroark than Sableye is. However, in Hydreigon, it just doesn't really matter. So that's an interesting thing to notice from the data so far. But here's going to be an example of Sableye, which is playing, again, Bombardier and Darkrai, and then Mega Sableye, Double Rocky Helmet, Double Lucky Ice Pop. So Zoroark, Sableye, but this deck list is struggling from a win rate perspective, very much so. But if we take a look at Zoroark and Absol, the win rate is much higher. It's pretty much the same deck, but just much higher here with, again, Absol instead of Sableye. So there probably is a definitive reason for that. I think likely the reason is that Zoroark oftentimes isn't, you don't oftentimes go double Zoroark, right? So at the end of the day, if you're going to be playing Zoroark, you probably lead with Zoroark, and then once your first one goes down, then you go into either Absol or Sableye or Darkrai. Whereas Hydreigon, you're going to try to go Hydreigon into Hydreigon, and then the game at that point's probably over anyway, but then you would go into your Mega, which it matters less. So I think in that sense, the fact that you can go Zoroark into Absol is probably better than Zoroark into Sableye, and the reason for that is I'm not even exactly sure, but it's probably the fact that, especially into like Gardevoir, Diancie decks, and other decks as well that might be playing supporter cards, it's probably better to go in there and just remove the Cyrus, remove the Sabrina, remove the Diancie, remove the Lily, the Erica, and then not lose the game off like a healing based, you know, card or something like that. That's probably how I feel about Zoroark. I don't know if that's exactly the case here, but it seemingly just sort of is the case. Also, if you lead Absol, it is a bit better if you're forced to attack with it, because you can maybe get rid of that Cyrus early, tank a hit, retreat, and then you never really have to worry about Absol getting brought back into the active. So it is interesting. The data here is very interesting. Hydreigon, it doesn't seem to matter, but for Zoroark, it does seem to matter pretty substantially. And the win rate is very different, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to put Zoroark, Sableye down here into like low B tier, and I'm going to be putting Absol Zoroark into the A tier. In fact, there is a very distinct difference between these two decks for whatever the reason. In fact, I'm actually going to be putting this higher up. I'm actually going to just be putting this like right here. I think this is like probably the best dark type deck we have. That's not like Oricorio or Greninja. I'll put it below Milotic, but it's very good. I mean, the difference between these two decks is like a pretty substantial difference, at least from a win rate perspective, which is crazy. Now, again, like I said, I forgot to mention, I forgot to put on Dark Greninja onto the tier list, which is funny because it is the most played deck so far this season. But again, I just want to talk about it really quickly. So, well, I'll leave it for the end. That's what I'll do because I did forget it and I apologize. But anyway, I'll put a timestamp for it at the end of the video. How about that? Okay. But this is going to be Sableye and Darkrai, which I mean, I guess, yeah, that's a different archetype. So we can't use that as the Darkrai Greninja version or whatever. But anyway, Mega Sableye Darkrai right here is the 12th most played deck. And this is going to be 138 to 147 and a 47% win rate. Now, the metagame flipped on its head and a lot of decks were pretty well positioned to deal with Oricorio. But this is kind of what this deck is, which is kind of just Turbo Sableye, Turbo Darkrai, Oricorio. And it's totally fine. The downside to this deck to me is that you're we're just not really playing Greninja, and a lot of decks can deal with Oricorio. And we're not really playing a lot of Sustain in here, although we are playing PCL and 2 Lucky Ice Pops. A big portion of this deck is to basically Turbo Pichu into Sableye, and then utilize Rocky Helmet, Lucky Ice Pop, and Darkrai to win. Because if your opponent can deal with Oricorio, then that's not an effective strategy. So you just Crackly Toss onto Sableye, you go in turn 2, you try to keep it alive, and then you set it up with Darkrai, Nightmare Aura Pings, and Rocky Helmets, and it's really not that bad. But what I've found is if you're going to be playing like a Turbo Sableye deck with Darkrai and a baby Pokemon, you're going to want to play Greninja, and that's kind of where that Manectric Greninja deck that I kind of built and was playing a lot of kind of fit into that concept. And I just really don't think playing Oricorio, at least at this point, is going to win you that many games, as we see tons of Butterfree everywhere, tons of Greninja, tons of like non-EX Gardevoir, Vaporeon. Like there's just a lot. There's a lot of stuff. Magnezone, Hydreigon. A lot of stuff that can beat Oricorio right now, so this is an archetype that I think is solid, but really not something I would invest super heavily into. I'm going to put this right like here. I'm going to put it just right in the middle of B tier. I think it's just a totally okay deck. It's probably better than Zoroark Sableye, at least at the moment, but actually I'm going to put it below Goodra. Goodra's killing it. I'll put it right here. It's fine. You know, a lot of B tier, but again, I just didn't want to put a million decks into A tier this week, so that's what we're doing there. Anyway, next up is Puppy Pile. Let's talk about Puppy Pile. Are people playing this? Puppy Pile is down here, the 32nd most played deck, and it has a very low win rate. Unfortunately, one of the lowest. The only one lower is Ursaluna, sadly. But Puppy Pile, I mean, it's won 50 games. You got to understand that, like, if you look at this archetype, you're like, oh, this is very not good. But it also went 50 and 69, which means it did win 41, almost 42% of its games into effectively all of the best meta decks in the entire game. So as far as decks go, it's really not terrible. It definitely can win games. Let's pull up an example here for you guys. This is going to be without Bounded Field. I know some people are like, oh, you got to play Bounded Field. Can we find a version with Bounded Field? Right here. Here's one with Bounded Field. Okay. It went 4-3 at a tournament. Again, it's really not bad. This is not a terrible deck. Because again, when we do the tier lists, we're ranking all of the top decks in the game. So to be at the bottom of the top is honestly not that bad. There's a million other things you could play that are worse than this. But, you know, we got to rank it, you know, relatively based on everything else on the tier list here. And Puppy Pile, unfortunately, do we want to put it D tier? I mean, some decks have to go D tier. They do. So, I mean, I'm just going to put it D. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the Puppy Pile enjoyers. It's a fun deck. It's a great deck. It's just not a competitive deck in the overall scope of the metagame. So, D tier for Puppy Pile, and I do apologize. I apologize for that, but that's where it will go. Next up is going to be Altaria Greninja. Are people playing this? Maybe I forgot to swap this for Dark Greninja. Are people playing Altaria and Greninja? I guess, yeah. Okay, so the 29th most played deck. It's got about a 50% win rate. Has anything really changed here? I guess probably not. People playing 1 Elegant Cape, 1 Lucky Egg, which is interesting. I don't know how I feel about this. I guess maybe it's just not that good this season. It's hard. I guess maybe the sample size is so small. If it's about a 50% win rate and the sample size is fairly small so far this season, it's hard to really get a read on it. I definitely don't think this is bad, and it's probably better than Sleep Altaria, if we're being honest with you. So Greninja's Altaria, I mean, are we going to put it... Do we put it A tier? Probably just a bottom A tier placement. I feel confidently that this cannot be a B tier deck. This objectively has to be a pretty strong deck. There's just not many things in the game that hard counter this. And I think it probably should see more play, but it hasn't seen a ton of play, so we're going to put it bottom of A tier, very low A tier, and I'll put it next to Gardevoir. Honestly, a lot of the Psychic decks don't feel incredible this season. There was a lot of Dark early on, but also there's just better options, I think, for the most part. So we're going to go ahead and put it into the A tier, which I think is fine. Bottom A tier. But next up is Ursaluna. This is the really cool Ursaluna deck with Celebii. Some people are playing this. It's the 24th most played deck this season. Unfortunately, it's got the lowest win rate out of any of the decks that we're ranking today. It's got a 38.5% win rate, 47-72. And again, this is a really, really cool deck. This is a super cool deck. It's basically Memory Light or Time Recall Celebii with Ursaluna. You can use Raging Claws. Ursaluna has Guts. It's got a ton of HP. It's honestly not bad. It's not bad. It's pretty nice. The unfortunate thing about Ursaluna is that if you want to use Ursaring's attack, you can't rare candy because then you're not using Ursaring, and you kind of need Ursaring's attack, which means that you're a stage 2 Pokemon that's not playing rare candy. Yes, you can turbo to it with Manectric. Ogerpon does provide this deck a little bit of consistency, but unfortunately, it's just not good. It's just not good enough. You know what I mean? Like, that's where we're at here. And it's not a downside here. It's a very creative deck, a very fun deck, but into all of this other stuff here that we're ranking on the tier list, you know, unfortunately, it's just not, it's not it. It's just not. It's not a. Now you could make a case that it's like C tier, even though the win rate's the lowest out of any of these decks. You can make a case that, you know, maybe the people playing this don't know what they're doing. I don't know. Maybe the deck list isn't perfect, but the renditions of this deck list that people are playing and the people that have played this deck list based on how well they performed, that's all we have. And again, I believe you if you come in and say, oh, that's not the perfect list. I got the best list and I win all my games. Like, I believe you. Sure. But I don't know. I don't have that information. All I have is the info that we have available here. So Ursaluna is going to go D tier next to Puppy Pile. In fact, I'll put it below Puppy Pile because it has a lower win rate. But anyway, next up, let's take a look at Mega Manectric, which did make top 4 at our tournament for like the gajillionth time. And it's only the 23rd most played deck, 86 and 80 with 6 ties. So, I mean, it's certainly pretty solid. The thing is about Mega Manectric, especially now with Turbo Miraidon and Magnezone seeing play, it's just too... People are going to play Miraidon. It's newer, it's flashier, it's a bit more, you know, diverse. So I don't know if Zeraora and Manectric is ever going to really catch up in terms of play rate or success rate. And as an example, I mean, Miraidon Magnezone made it to finals, and in fact, it did actually beat Manectric in top 4. So to me, it's sort of like, yes, this is a very, very, very solid deck list, but we have a very similar deck that I do kind of put above it on the tier list. Now, I do think Manectric's really good. I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to put it right there into the A tier. It probably could be like above Meowscarada, but let's give Meowscarada its respect. Manectric is another A tier deck. It's a very good, solid deck, but there's just something better than it that's a little bit too similar. So we're going to go ahead and put Manectric in the A tier, and we're going to leave Miraidon Magnezone into the S tier. And I feel pretty good about that. But next up, let's take a look at Hisuian Zoroark, which, you know, the only real way that people are playing this right now is, in fact, with Butterfree. And if we can find it somewhere, where is it? Right here, it's the 13th most played deck. However, Butterfree and Hisuian Zoroark is objectively the same deck as Butterfree and Sceptile, but as we see, it's clearly not as good. It has a 135 to 137 record, so just a bit under 50%. It's seeing less play, it's seeing less wins on average. I just don't think it's as good. And unfortunately, when you're playing a deck that is totally not bad, a very, very normal, solid deck list, but when there's something just very similar to it, but better, you know, we gotta separate them, and we gotta kind of put that, you know, on record, right? I guess the only difference here is that you play Klefki, right? So instead of playing Trico, Grovyle, and Sceptile, you're gonna play Klefki because you can just immediately put it in the discard pile, and it's nice to get the tool removal. But unfortunately, again, I would rather play Sceptile. If I'm gonna be playing the Butterfree stuff, which again, fundamentally, I do think the Butterfree stuff is the best partner for Zoroark, I would rather just play Sceptile because it's just better, you know, and that's such a weird place to be in. I do think Hisuian Zoroark is a really cool card. It's just unfortunate that, you know, there's not like a clear, unique, definitive best way to play it that's different than other archetypes, and I think that's unfortunate. And this is the most popular way to play it. I'm going to be putting this into the B tier, bottom. It's either bottom B or, yeah, we'll put it in the, I mean, is it better than... I don't know, actually. I'm going to put it like right here. In fact, it's probably better than Zoroark Sableye. I'll put it right there. I'll put it into the B tier. In fact, this should probably go C tier, right? Didn't this struggle pretty hard? I'm going to put this, I mean, yeah. I'll do this. This is super random. I'm going to swap Hisuian Zoroark into the bottom B, and I'm going to put Zoroark Sableye into the C tier just because this thing's win rate was really abysmal and Absol's was really good. So I'm just going to I'm going to separate these by 2 tiers. It doesn't really matter that much, but you know, because right now Sleep Milotic is just alone in the C tier, which is pretty funny. I guess whatever, I'll keep it up here for consistency reasons. Milotic is alone in the C tier. It is just not good. Like it's not even B tier potential. I think all of the decks in B tier are in fact better than Sleep Milotic, but whatever. Maybe we don't even need a D tier. Like we could just put all of these in the C tier, but no, I think this is probably pretty segmented. Should Puppy Pile get out of D tier? It did have a 41% win rate. Should I give it the nod? Would that be pretty funny? Nah, yeah, we'll do it. All right. No, we won't do it. Okay, it'll stay D tier. All right, anyway, that's how I'm feeling about this. Tier list looks crazy right now, but that's kind of what the meta feels like. All right, Giratina and Indeedee, which people are playing and has done extremely well. This is like the fundamental hard counter deck currently in the metagame. Look at this. It's the 16th most played deck. It's gone 151 to 98. That's a 57% win rate. That includes the 13 ties this deck has. This is a deck, it went undefeated at a tournament here out of 128 players, which is really funny. And it also did well at our tournament. It got to 15th place. So this is one of those decks that unfortunately you just can't beat unless you're playing the right deck. It's one of those things where, you know, it's a very hard counter meta type of deck. We have to respect something like this. Giant Cape, Starting Plains, Double Indeedee, or Ikoria will effectively win you the game outright if your opponent isn't playing the right cards. And something like this is really annoying, but this has popped up from time to time. It just feels to me right now that a lot of the cards people are playing to beat Oricorio kind of just barely can beat Oricorio, which is really where this deck comes in, right? When you're playing Butterfree, when you're playing Zeraora, when you're playing, you know, whatever, like unless you're able to hit for basically a 90 to 100 damage every turn with a non-EX Pokemon, like you're not going to be able to get over the hump with this Oricorio deck. And that's fundamentally very, very annoying. This to me is like the new like Steelix EX type deck in the metagame where it's like sometimes you just can't beat it. Unfortunately for this deck list, if you're playing up against anything else that is a sustained deck, which we don't really have any other ones currently in the metagame, then the game will never end. You just don't. Neither player can deal enough damage. Like anything with like damage, like Goodra, for example, the game might never end. Well, it would because Goodra can KO Oricorio, but like Mega Steelix versus this deck will go on effectively forever. Double Poncho as well, which is really funny. So, I mean, this is a really solid deck list. And again, it's got an incredibly high win rate. This is the true Oricorio counter. What's crazy is that the only way for Oricorio to act as like a true counter in the metagame now is to be propped up by, you know, Cape, Plains, and Indeedees, which is kind of crazy, but that's where we're at because, you know, the metagame in Power Creep has kind of outgrown Oricorio to a pretty significant degree, but a true Oricorio hard counter is what this is. This is what we have currently in the metagame. And honestly, I mean, looking at that win rate, we got to give it its respect. I'm going to put it in the A tier. I'm going to just put it middle A tier, mostly because yes, like its win rate is really high. It's like the only deck to go 12-0 at a tournament this season. But it's also super easy to just completely hard counter this archetype. The thing is, I just don't think enough people are going to be respecting this for it to ever be hard countered. So it's kind of tough. It's interesting. Maybe Hydreigon comes back into the metagame and just mops this deck. I mean, who knows? But it's really solid. So I'm going to just put it right here into the... I'll put it below Zoroark. I'll put it right here into the A tier. Very good deck. I mean, it's annoying, but it's very good. It's a very strong deck. Next up is Mega Lucario. And honestly, I think Mega Lucario's killing it. I think it's a great choice right now. It is currently the 9th most played deck this season, but there's also this version down here, which is, I guess, just less good. But this is Mega Lucario EX with the normal Lucario, 220 to 178 and 21 ties. And that's almost a 53. Oh, but it would be close to like a 54%, 55% win rate without those ties. The 9th most played deck. And honestly, it's really good. It's really good. I really think Lucario is fundamentally the #1 fighting type deck option moving forward, whether you're playing the Sock or the Zygarde, one Hitmonlee, you know, double Lucario. Like, it's just good. It can do things that other decks can't really do. You don't really have to worry about kind of that mid-range HP range where you know, a lot of Pokemon can't one KO because you can. Like, that's the difference with Lucario, is it just has a little bit more reach than almost every other deck in the metagame. Being able to hit for, you know, whatever it is, you know, 140, but if you buff it with Lucario and whatnot, you can hit for like 160, 180, even, you know, upwards of like 190, right? So it's really good. It's really good for that sense. And it has that benefit that most other decks don't. 190 HP is a really big deal because you can live hits again for most things. So I really like Mega Lucario. I think it's well positioned, and I think Sock is really cool because it does hit around like heavy helmet type stuff. It can KO babies. This is a deck that's pretty effective into Oricorio as well. So I really like it. I generally think Lucario is probably one of the better options in the metagame right now. We're going to put this in the A tier. Now, where in the A tier are we going to put it? I'm going to put it right here. I'm actually going to put Dark, Fighting, and Psychic kind of packaged up here together because I think these are really solid. I think these are all really good choices right now. Mega Lucario is really good. Super solid. So many A-tier decks. And if they're not A-tier, most of them are B-tier, in fact. But anyway, let's get to the GOAT here. Let's get to the last deck, which is, of course, Suicune Baxcalibur. And as we know, it got first place at our tournament this past weekend. But if we take a look at the data, it is the 6th most played deck currently, but it has by far, I would say, the most impressive average win rate out of any of the decks that we're covering in today's video. 414 wins to 296 losses with 20 ties is still almost a 57% win rate. This thing is killing it. This is the deck. This is still the best deck in the game. People are disrespecting it. It just wins. It just wins. It's incredibly strong, incredibly good. Definitely, in my opinion, it's probably the best deck. It's probably the best deck currently right now. Let's pull up an example here. The 11-1 record from our past Sunday's tournament here. Very good. It's good. It's good. It's a good deck. It's got everything. It's got it all. You got Suicune, you got HP buffing, you got extra draw power, you have bench damage, you have energy acceleration, you have Oricorio counterplay. you got it all. Whatever you're looking for in a deck list, Suicune's got it. It's always had it, and it still has it, and you're going to have to just deal with that. The meta can shape around this. There is a future where, you know, Suicune might become the #1 example, but like I said, even though we did beat, this deck did beat Miraidon and Magnezone in the finals, you know, there are matchups that are, you know, not super ideal for Suicune. But I mean, as it stands now, S tier. This is the deck. This is the deck. In fact, I'm going to put Sceptile below Magnezone. And this is how I feel currently. That's the metagame. Now, lastly, though, because we didn't put Greninja Sableye on the tier list, even though it's the most played deck this season, honestly, I think it's solid. It does have a sub 50% win rate. I think, again, people are playing it maybe not super correctly right now, but maybe try out the Manectric version, see what you think. I don't think it's that well positioned, Sableye in general, with all of the Sceptiles seeing play. So on this tier list, if I had to rank Greninja Sableye, I would probably put it low A tier. I would. I put it like right at the bottom of A tier. Next to Altaria Greninja. I put it right down here towards the bottom. And that's that, basically. But that's my tier list. That's what this season is looking like to me. Now, again, anything that is in the middle to high A tier range could easily transition up into S tier. I feel very strongly that the difference between S tier and the top of A tier really isn't that strong. And honestly, the difference between most of B tier and lower A tier obviously is also not that different. You know, mostly the decks I put into B tier, of course, there's just other options in the A tier that I think are probably just very similar, but just better. And that's inherently why the B tier does exist. I put Sleep Milotic in the C tier because it's got a really bad win rate. It's lower than basically everything above it, but it is better than those D tier decks, which there are a couple of decks that are just really not worth your time. That's Puppy Pile. That's Ursaluna. Again, play them if you want, but they're just not going to win nearly as many games. And that's the metagame. Currently, for me, that's how I feel about this. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. What would you change? I would love to hear your guys' opinions. And don't forget to register. Don't forget, go and play in PMPT number 38 so you can play which deck you want to play and then prove me wrong if I ranked it too low on this tier list. But I got a feeling that based around the results this past weekend and based around the results of this upcoming week, this tier list will likely be somewhat accurate. And we'll see how the meta progresses. We'll see how things change. It's going to be a wild season, so many different decks. But I do think there is a clear interaction between a lot of these archetypes, meaning if some things are more well-positioned than others, you know, they're going to be able to shift a little bit on the tier list right now. But looking forward, I think that it's Suicune, it's Miraidon. Like, that's the core of the meta. And I think Sceptile will be extremely popular, which means Dark-type decks probably won't do very well. Suicune beats Hydreigon and whatnot anyway, so there's not a lot of position for things to enter into the metagame. There's just not. At least coming up into like S tier potential, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am wrong. We'll have to just wait and see. I'm really excited. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. We're almost at 50,000 subscribers. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Go and register for PMPT 38. We'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Have a good one. And yeah. Bye.